Hi everyone, welcome to this edition of Serverless Craic. We're going to have we have a special guest today. Let's maybe do a couple of intros first. My name is Dave Anderson, contributor here at the Serverless Edge and technical fellow Bizarre Voice. I'll let Mark and Mike introduce themselves.
Mark McCann, contributor at Serverless Edge, stay-at-home dad, I guess. Go for it, Mike.
Happy Friday, Michael O'Reilly, architect at Globalization Partners, GP, and also contributor on the Serverless Edge.
We're joined today by Matt Coulter, who's very kindly agreed to take time in his busy schedule to come here and talk nonsense with us. Matt, do you want to just maybe give yourself a quick intro and just tell us a bit about yourself? I know we all good friends. We've worked together for a long time, so shoot.
Yeah, so for anyone who doesn't know me, my name is Matt Coulter. I'm an enterprise architect in Liberty Mutual, sort of working out of Liberty IT in Belfast. And for the past couple of years, I've been on this serverless first well-architected journey with a lot of our teams. So I've been doing that primarily through technology called AWS CDK. And that's where people might have seen me doing things like open source work with CDK Patterns or like running a conference called CDK Day.
Cool, very good. Lots of interesting stuff there. And I mean, you know, and full disclosure, we've all worked together for a long time, so we're very familiar with a lot of this work. But it's always good to kind of have a chat about. So I'm interested in your kind of opinion on this. You know, it's one of the things that we always talked about was how do we encourage a really strong developer community within the company. But I mean, how did you find kind of enabling engineers in a big enterprise, a big company?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question, and it has multiple subcomponents to how you answer it. Because when you talk about enabling engineers in a big company, you're talking about large numbers of engineers. So it could be thousands across the globe we're talking about, as opposed to maybe a couple of small teams. And that means that the most important thing is you need to have alignment on direction. So you need to make sure that everybody there knows where they're going. And I think that's the very first and most important thing. And that's what most people skip, because if you don't tell people the direction, everyone will just head their own way and it'll all actively work against itself because it becomes competition. Then the second thing is you need to have enabling constraints, as Mark loves to call them. And that's where you set up your guardrails so that it's safe for people to experiment and go the direction you've set. They know that there's a maximum level of damage that they can cause. And then the third thing is you actually need to walk the walk that you're setting out there. So that's where I think it's important to be able to show working, like in this case, working software, that you can say, I'm asking you to be serverless first. Well, okay, this is how I think you should do it. Here are working production examples in the way that you're going to do it, as opposed to here's just a high level theory.
Very good. Yeah.
That's
going ahead there.
See the patterns thing though, like you were saying there about like things like enabling constraints and sort of, you know, setting a direction. Is that kind of harvesting like patterns? So if you go across like 6 squads in an enterprise organization, and you'll notice that they do use sort of common patterns. You kind of see it's how cloud providers sort of identify their best managed services, so things like queues or gateways or topics. Is there a process there? Do you guys, that sort of happens with regards, getting everybody to come together and, move in a certain direction? How do you get everybody kind of working, to that direction?
Yeah, and there's always a challenge between allowing divergence and then what the right point is to tell everybody you need to converge on the right solution. And that's where I think you need, if the direction is new and different to what the company has done before, providing everybody's going the same general direction, like saying serverless, for instance, so everybody is trying to use Lambda, DynamoDB, step functions. If they're all doing it slightly different for a while, I think that's okay. But then that's where, as you say, you need a process where you can go through each of the teams and say, I see similarities in teams 1, 7, and 32 for the sake of argument. So what we need to do is start bringing it together and saying, what's the right way to do this? And that's where, specifically for cloud workloads, that's where the well-architected framework has been the one common language we can use to speak to say, yous are all different. What is personal preference and what is industry best practice for how this should be done? And that's jumping into teams and doing well architected reviews is a big piece of how we can unearth the similarities and differences.
And that was a big thing. I mean, like we all work together. The fact that having architects that could see right across the organization was always really handy because you could spot those patterns. I mean, a couple of years, like 10 years ago, when everyone was on different platforms, it was a nightmare because it was two completely different things. But remember, we used to always say that there's a convergence on AWS because everyone's in the same space now. So there's no excuse, even if it's two different languages, the same architectural patterns are there. So I think that made it easier.
And I think the well architected for me is all about consistency as well. And you know, so if once you identify the patterns, then really the well architected is really the consistent kind of benchmark in terms of, you know, guidance and advice to how this thing should be kind of set up and architected effectively, you know. So if you can get that sort of thing in place, it should sort of facilitate that convergence in a way, as I think is kind of is what you're saying there, isn't it, really?
Yeah, and we also have a very strong process at the minute, or culture, I guess, of inner source sharing or reusable patterns that work. So you've seen like Mark did a talk at CDK Day where he talked about the software accelerator we have and how it's used with AWS CDK. So we allow anybody to contribute a pattern in that's working software to our accelerator, and then everyone else can just use that. Now, whenever I talk about the divergence and convergence, we could have every team could theoretically contribute a slight variation on the same pattern. So that's where if you use the well-architected framework, you can assess them all. And then you can say, of all these patterns, we don't need to delete all of the duplicate ones, but this one here is the well-architected one. This is the one we're going to put at the top of the page. And this is the one we think everyone should contribute to and converge on. So that's how we use it, those two things combined.
Yeah. I think the guardrails are sort of key to enabling that contribution as well. There was good enabling constraints, enterprise guardrails, if you will, that, you know, whatever developers are contributing, it had to adhere to the standards for the enterprise, right? So that and we made, you know, Liberty made it easy for them to contribute and get that rapid feedback that their pattern, their solution was actually adhering to those standards. You know, it's one thing to say, oh, you have an inner source community, and then make it really impossible for anybody to get over the bar of contribution. It's another to make that contribution easy and make it the easy way. And this is where, like Matt, you did a lot of the, you know, the blogs and the internal blogs around, you know, contributing about, you know, how easy this is and, you know, how quickly you could do this. You know, I think one of the key elements here is to get developers on the step 1, 2, and 3. And then they can go the rest of the way themselves. I think, you know, there's like any of these big waves of technology change, you know, there's a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt around some of this stuff. And just getting them started down a path, then opens it up to them to take it to the next step.
And do you think, I mean, one of the things, do you think the Warley Mapping helped? Because I mean, one of the things, like, we're obviously big fans of Warley Mapping. Do you think Warley Mapping helped either figure out what constraints we needed, or just help engineers see the way forward? Like, what's your opinion on that, Matt? I mean, how much do you think that helped on this journey?
Yeah, I think I would actually say the Warley mapping that we did was a game changer for that. And I don't want to undersell it, because so at the point a couple of years ago, you had a point in time where it was Mark and myself were dropped into a new market for us. So it was over a couple of hundred developers all working on different apps. And we knew the direction we wanted to go was serverless first. But actually using Warley Maps, we could understand our current positioning and form a strategy for what we wanted to do. So we were able to see exactly all of the technical debt, the code liability between all of the teams, and see how could we have the most impact with the patterns and the enablement that we want to go for. So I personally think that was key to the process.
Yeah, and the being able to talk people through that evolution axis. See this big complicated thing you're having loads of trouble with? that needs to just go away into this new thing that you can replace it with, and those hundreds of, like those tens of thousands of lines of code can become practically nothing. Yeah, that's an easy sell.
Yeah, and Mike, you mentioned earlier, man, Joe, how did you spot what the patterns should be that you sort of coalesce around? The maps helped identify the commonalities and the problems that engineers were having. So then that almost became your candidate list for, these are things we should consider if we're creating these pre-built patterns. We need to make sure we address these needs that that the developers on the ground were having.
Yeah, I think I remember that process you guys went through, and we done a similar one within sort of our market. And like, I remember at the time, just the amount of, it's okay if one squad is kind of doing, like, you spot like an inefficiency in the value stream, so there's a bit of ops here in terms of managing this up server, or in terms of managing this database cluster. But when you do that across, say, 30 squads, then you begin to really be able to quantify the actual effect that's having on the broader organization. So it's duplication of effort, and it's just so many lost developer hours there in terms of productivity. And I think those were, I remember right at the time, they were largely tech stack type Warley maps, where we were mapping the sort of the various tech stacks that are leveraged across the squads. And I think for a developer enablement team with that sort of information, you get really probably, in terms of like penetrating the market, you can identify which particular patterns are probably going to add most value. And I'm sure you'll probably remember which pattern did you release first, and and how did that take off? I guess there was, I'm sure if you remember back, there was,
Yeah. Okay. Are they still number 1 and 2 on the catalog, Matt? I don't know.
They are.
Oh, is that insider information? Insider information.
But it is funny though, because there was a point in time where all the Warley maps were layered on top of each other for every team, making an Uber map. And that give you, I know every map is imperfect and they're all wrong, but at least we were as biased in each map. So therefore, if you lay them on top of each other, they're comparable. And you could draw the line and you can say, okay, we want you to be close to your customer. And you could see what percentage and how much of the entire market was doing undifferentiated heavy lifting, and physically draw a line and say, we want you to transition that from there to here.
Yeah. Do you remember? Yeah, sorry, go on ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and drawing that line and making that visual is different than just phoning somebody and saying, I want you to move.
And even more powerful, I mean, it's almost like, there's a couple of times when we drew a map and the person doing the map themselves would say, this thing's really important, and then they draw it and it's way down in, like, invisible commodity, and be like, what's that doing sitting down there? Like, we don't need to be doing that. And they'd almost realize themselves, wow, we need to stop doing that. Like, it's almost like a pair of binoculars. You can just like put on, you can see for miles. It gives you huge vision into what's happening. It's mental.
It was like when Matthew mentioned, when we dropped in there into that new market, it was a rapid accelerator for our understanding of what we got ourselves into. So it was like very quickly you're up to speed as an architect in that area, going, right, okay, I understand the landscape now. I understand where I can make an impact. I understand, what our next sort of right move should be. I think the mapping really, for any sort of aspiring leader or architect, that sort of level of mapping, just give us so much situational awareness that allow us to actually do the next right thing, right?
Yeah. So there was a flywheel effect there, but I mean, as you mentioned at the top of the chat there, Matt, CDK was massive. Like, I personally think that was an unbelievable accelerator. But do you think you would have made as much progress without CDK? And maybe, I mean, CDK is cloud development kit, and those patterns just enabled you to basically create a piece of infrastructure in seconds. Do you think you would have made the same progress without CDK?
Yeah, and it's a fascinating question. So for anybody who's watching this and doesn't know CDK, the difference between it and traditional infrastructure as code. So CDK is focused on building your infrastructure through programming languages like TypeScript, Python, .NET, Java, that kind of construct, where the whole point is bringing the cloud to the developer, as opposed to making the developer relearn to understand how to manage things like CloudFormation templates, which could be thousands of lines of YAML. And on one hand, they're beautifully succinct, a CloudFormation template, but on the other hand, if you're a developer who spends every day working with business logic, whenever you transition to the YAML file, personally, my head goes, I lose track of it. I don't know where I am. So whenever I first saw AWS CDK, and I will give credit to Mark because he kept dropping hints at me for weeks. It was like, there's this new thing, Amazon are launching CDK. You should probably look at it someday.
But he does that every week. He does that every week. So
the signal to noise ratio is quite high there.
Yeah, but I'll give you credit, at least on that one. You did say it.
You were right that time.
Yeah. So he said that, which got me to go, okay, what is this CDK thing? And I took a really common use case for us at the time, which was like a private API gateway with a custom authorizer lambda. And that was about 1,500 lines of CloudFormation template. And on top of that, it also had a load of quirks. Now, in the time since then and now, they've fixed a lot of the quirks with this. But for instance, you had to manually modify pieces of the CloudFormation every deploy. Otherwise, your gateway didn't deploy. It was all kinks like that. And so I took that and built an AWS CDK construct. And this was pretty much a week or something after AWS CDK went GA. And I was able to reduce that whole thing down to a maximum of 14 lines. That was really 5 lines of code.
Yeah.
And it enabled you to write local unit tests. And it brought in our DevOps practices because now, from a developer perspective, it is just TypeScript and we know how to handle TypeScript. Yeah. So I think that shift was, it's hard to describe how that shift gave us a kickstart in the developer mindset and coming on board, as opposed to we used to sit around and tell our CloudFormation horror stories of the things that we'd broke and couldn't backtrack on.
It just made it easy. Like I remember, I used to be able to IAM someone a couple of lines of CDK and it would work. Now it never happened in CloudFormation.
Yeah, and I think it's also that the timing was perfect because a lot of developers were starting to read about the cloud, start to sort of explore it, but it was terrifying to them. It was like all the stories about you running up big AWS bills and their private accounts and all, not securing it properly. It's sort of and then this CDK stuff come in, the patterns you created, it almost demystified it a little bit. It allowed them it lowered the cognitive burden for them. It lowered the barriers to entry. And one thing you didn't really mention there, but the pattern you created, it was incorporated into our CI/CD pipeline. It was incorporated and it followed all the enterprise standards and all the right sort of checks and balances that an enterprise needs. So it removes again that friction for developers to experiment and just try it out without the fear of, am I going to blow up the cloud? Am I going to take down all of the internal sort of systems?
Yeah. Well, one thing I would say as well is that I think having that developer community in place also helps with CDK and really harnessing the economies of scale that you can get, in a big organization, and if you've got like that funnel that you guys created there with, the accelerator and the that platform, that the developers can leverage other teams' constructs and also kind of contribute certain things back. And I know with the CDK patterns that you set up as well, Matt, from an open source kind of funnel and channel, and being able to contribute that back into the broader community, I think it gives that helped in terms of center people around and make sure that people didn't go off, starting from scratch constantly or going off in 50 different directions or coming up with their own, you don't want an organization with 50 different flavors of the same construct, for example. Do you know what I mean?
Right. So what you just said is sort of key. So what I originally described there was why I got interested in AWS CDK. But at that point in time, I have seen dozens, if not more, of amazing technologies fail because they didn't build the community around it. Yeah. So it's just sitting there shining and brilliant in the corner and nobody's noticing it. So the vast majority of the work that I have been doing over the past couple of years is storytelling and actually getting people engaged. So that's why instead of like, as one person, how can I affect change across hundreds of people? The only way I knew how to do it was to specifically take the best of cloud and bring it inside Liberty. So that's why I started looking at how should we be building serverless architectures? What are the industry experts saying? And they were people like AWS heroes, like Jeremy Daly. And so being able to go out and look at the best patterns that are out there, build them open source and say for the world, this is the pattern, let's discuss it. And then bring a slightly modified version of that pattern into Liberty, but tweak it for compliance and audit and our general needs. It changed the conversation from trying to custom build everything for us to let's engage with the wider community and let's try and build things together. And I do think if I was trying to do it again, that part has been a massive success, and I wouldn't change anything about that story. I do think trying to get the developers to look outside it's the big difference.
Yeah, I mean, and that was a super magnifier multiplier, sorry, because going external, the influence internally is a massive pattern that's kind of existence proof, and I mean that got you loads of press with AWS. So Werner Vogels, your bestie mate, and even on the summit last year, he's given you a couple of name checks. I mean, and that just amplifies it again. So I mean, it's amazing to see that validation, and that builds up a lot of authority in the space.
I think even Googleability, for the first time, a lot of these internal things where developers could find the answers to it by doing a Google search, and they'd find cdkpatterns.com, or they'd find the patterns that are out there, or the technology that's the same as what they were using internally. A lot of the times, and historically, especially with big enterprises, the software that teams can typically work on can be so bespoke to them that there's not much external help. Whereas now, there's videos, there's courses, there's YouTube, there's patterns, there's websites that was supporting the general direction. That was a game changer, because they could just self-study, and then Cloud Guru courses, Pluralsight, all these things sort of supported that direction as well. They could self-serve.
Yeah, I mean, there was a cracking example, and I don't know if I can go into specifics, but I remember one scenario where we'd been working a long time on getting like a particular capability enabled, and it was taking a wee bit of time. But in the background, we had a squad who was effectively just standing up that sort of higher order CDK construct. Don't quiz me on the level. Would that be probably like an L3 construct?
L3, yeah.
Yeah, so it'd be an L3 construct just sitting there ready to go. So as soon as that got the approval, it was literally pushed out into the broader kind of portfolio, and I was just ready there to be consumed by the whole organization, and that was a very powerful kind of enabler. Whereas in the past, it would have had to been, well, I need to educate these 40 engineers here on the specifics and the nuance of the architecture, and it would have been a far slower rollout. Whereas there, it was just literally a construct ready to consume, and you were like, wow, that's phenomenal.
Yeah, and I personally got value from stuff I can talk about, like the open source patterns. So whenever as an architect want to introduce a new capability into the org, things like X-ray for doing your distributed tracing across your architectures.
Yeah,
I was able to build the CDK pattern and put it out there and find flaws, and they're documented on the CDK pattern. And then before I can bring it into Liberty and actually say to teams, okay, use that, I'm having the conversations with AWS themselves to say, I now know as the enabling architect for this account what I need you to do before we can use this. Yeah. And that takes the frustration away from every team hitting the same issue, getting annoyed, and you almost get this collective buildup of frustration from all the developers if they're all hitting the same thing. Whereas I was taking it for them, and they knew they could come to me and ask that question. And I think that works really well.
Yeah, that fast flow, that flow efficiency that we talk about is removing impediments continuously. And like, you're going ahead of the game here and going, right, let's remove all the impediments. So whenever the teams adopt this, X-ray in this example, they're not going to get hit with all these impediments all the way along.
And one of the things, I mean, like we talk about, it's the same pattern that Amazon use. It's that ILC, that innovate, leverage, commoditize cycle. And I mean, we talk about the value flywheel, the fact that you build that clarity, that clarity of purpose. You can map to remove the impediments, drive forward to kind of then insert the technology, and finally you kind of go for your long-term value. So it's that same cycle. And I mean, as much as Amazon do that in their own space, I mean, you were kind of doing that as well by, an exciting pattern, leverage it, and then commoditize it. And let the developers move up. So I mean, there's a lot there. I mean, Matt, in your opinion, like how, if you're a company sitting listening to this or watching, how would you get going? What would you be for someone to get started?
Yeah, and I think if you're only getting going now, I think you can skip a few steps because a lot of things have evolved over the past couple of years. If you study where the industry has been going and where a lot of the big companies will tell you what they've been doing, the story is about empowerment and enablement and lifting your developers up, but it is also about how do you make sure that you have those enabling constraints to keep them together. And that's why you hear a lot of talk of like Spotify's golden path model, where you specifically pave the road for an implementation. And it's okay if you want to deviate from it, but if you deviate, you're on your own. You got to keep it going. Whereas if you stay on the golden path, that they'll keep it up to date and they'll keep it maintained. So if I was starting today, I would be looking at, well, for our company, I would go in and do the Warley Mapping, like we mentioned earlier, and say, what is our landscape? And from there, what is our golden path going to be? And make it so easy to follow the golden path that the developers won't even think about going elsewhere. So it's not a case of saying you have to do this. It's a case of someone will suggest not doing it, and everyone will say, but why would we not do it? Because this is the right thing to do. That's the environment you're trying to create. And that's based on AWS well-architected framework. And for me, serverless first ideologies, because it enables you to specifically get down into the golden path, as opposed to just saying, if you go for a containerized route, you can't get as detailed with what your golden path is going to be, because it'll be like we use Spring Boot and we use microservices. Whereas if you go with serverless, you can say, these are the core technologies we want to leverage in these instances. This is our orchestrator. This is whatever. And it really does show the commonalities between teams and makes golden path easier.
Yeah, you can be very fine-grained in your enabling constraints.
Exactly.
Very good.
I think the fast time to value is a key one as well. When developers are starting to embrace these sort of, the golden path and the patterns, the speed they were delivering value was, unheard of, and that just builds momentum. It keeps the flywheel turning. It means that, like you mentioned, they don't want to get off that golden path then, because they're seeing value being delivered really rapidly, right?
Yeah, that's the endorphin rush. That's the hook.
I think the other thing I'd say is like just sorry, Dave, just to kind of add on as well, is like there's the concept. So it's absolutely 100% on the golden paths, but as well you also create that avenue for the off-roading as well. So it's okay for teams to go and experiment on new routes or new pathways. They'll accept the fact that they're just going to go slow. But if it works out, there's a wee bit of investment there, from the community themselves to kind of bring that back in and extend the golden path offering, so you can kind of do that when you've got the community and when you've got those facilities that kind of funnel and harvest the efforts there from the squads. And that's where I think, again, it's another flywheel type thing where once you do it, it becomes almost self-sustaining, and it kind of looks after itself. And, then culture kind of leads out of that as well. So that's awesome.
Very good. Very good. So that's the crack. So I can leave it at that. That was a good chat. Thanks very much, Matt. I appreciate the time. And I hear you have a book coming out on CDK Book.
Yeah, so funnily enough, relevant topic. You can go to the cdkbook.com, and that's where there's a few of us have got together, and we've actually went through all the details you'll ever want to know about AWS CDK. And the plan is that it's out right now for pre-order, but it should be released. I think it's the 3rd of December is the plan to actually properly release it. So if you want to learn more, go there.
Cool. Very good. Very good. And then obviously we have our own book, the Serverless Edge, coming out next year, and there's lots of talking about kind of that value flywheel effect. So there's a lot of stuff there. And plus we're still blogging away on the serverlessedge.com. So you never know. We might see you again in some talk or something. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. Hopefully this isn't the end of me in the public realm. But...
All right, folks. Thanks very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.